Let's hear what research says about what spaces foreign nationals occupy. We're joined by Professor Jo Vearey from Wits African Center for Migration and Society. Thank you very much, Prof, for joining us this afternoon. I think before we begin, we were just having a conversation with the team to say the word foreign nationals makes me feel somewhat uncomfortable. So maybe let's unpack that, right? So who is a migrant and who is an immigrant?
So we know that this is always a challenge in thinking about definitions, and we also have to think about how definitions are also linked to legislative frameworks. So in the South African context, individuals who are seeking asylum would be governed under the Refugee Act. So that would include those who've lodged a claim for asylum, as well as those who have been granted a refugee status. For all other people who are born outside the country and moving into South Africa, are governed under the Immigration Act. And the Immigration Act allows for a range of different forms of documentation that are linked to different opportunities and the right to work, for example, to study, to come for business purposes, to visit family, and so forth. So we have a range of temporary visas, permanent residence visas, and obviously linked to other temporary, visitors' visas for shorter stays.
When we take a look at the issues of jobs, unemployment in South Africa, the belief or widely held belief that people who are not necessarily from South Africa come into the space and take jobs that belong to South Africans. What does your research suggest? Are people from outside of South Africa coming to take jobs from South Africans?
So, as you mentioned, this is a widely held belief, and it is important that we have up-to-date data statistics to help us better understand what's happening. And I think it's really important also to recognize that the conversation that we're having at the moment is also in the context of the impact of the last 2 years in particular, and on how high our current unemployment rates are, particularly amongst youth, and the impacts around inequality and inequity in the country. So research that has been undertaken in the last few years really does not suggest that foreign nationals are replacing or displacing native South Africans at the national level. But we do know that at a subnational level, at some point there might be differences in how the immigrant population who are working may have both negative effects but also positive effects. And what we see is that individuals from other countries also tend to be more likely, for example, to employ a foreign national, a South African national, are more likely to be working in lower paid sectors. We also know the importance of the ways in which gaps in employment are being filled by non-nationals in jobs that typically South Africans historically have been have been a bit reluctant to take up.
What sectors are they occupying?
So we often find foreign nationals, low-skilled foreign nationals working in, for example, the service industry, agriculture, large commercial farms, mining industry, domestic work, for example, but also more informally. We also know that there are foreign nationals who run registered spaza shops, for example, are registered as traders in inner city areas and so forth. We also then have what would be referred to as the high-skilled foreign nationals, individuals here under critical skills permits, for example, working across a range of sectors. And I think it's important that when we're talking about immigration, we're talking about so-called, foreign nationals in the workplace, that we don't focus only on the more informal sector, that we're also recognizing important contributions within higher-skilled domains.
The misconception, especially because we see images a lot of people from the continent boarding ships heading for Europe, is that a majority of the movement happens outside of the continent. Yes, movement happens outside of the continent, but the majority of the movement happens within the continent. Is South Africa the exception to the rule where this matter is concerned? I asked maybe to find what other countries are doing that we could maybe borrow from.
I mean, I think that, as you say, we have to think about what's happening in our context in relation to other areas. I think it's important to really consider the state of SADC when it comes to thinking about movement and the movement of individuals, including for work, and how restrictive that is, and that we don't have a free movement protocol. Whereas in other regions, I mean, ECOWAS is a really important example where movement of people is freer, and the ways in which that then links to issues around employment, around access to other social benefits, I think are critical and are issues that we need to be better considering when we're looking at our regional engagement with movement, with employment, and recognizing generally that anywhere on the continent, the importance of migration when we're thinking about economic development more broadly, social and economic development, and the important role that migration plays within that.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Professor Jo Vearey from Wits African Center for Migration and Society. We do understand you have another engagement, so thank you very much for availing yourself.